Hi, I'm Neena Lund.
I'm Bethany Smith.
I'm John Vallejo.
And we are working on Cultural Dinner Party. I'm going to go ahead and get started with the menu items that I chose, where I did Tlingit potlatch and Hindu weddings, and I also participated in my friend's Las Posadas, but we'll start with Tlingit potlatch. So potlatch means to give in the Tlingit language, and it's basically a celebration by for Northwest Coast natives, like Native Americans, and we're focusing on the Tlingit people. Have you guys ever been to a potluck?
Yeah.
Yes.
So basically a potluck is where everyone brings one dish and everyone shares. With Tlingit potlatches, which is actually the origination from the word potluck, only one person is expected to serve all of their guests. And what they do is one host will throw a potlatch in order to raise their status, or because they are a high-ranking person in that society, or they will do it for societal activities.
Oh, like what kind of activities?
Well, some of the societal activities that would happen in these Native American tribes is a totem pole raising or a house dedication, and they would also honor the dead. And that also goes into another activity they do at potlatches is gift giving. And with the funeral services, when you're a guest at a funeral potlatch, you would bring anything to help with the funeral. And but for those other societal activities, it's mainly just the host that's doing all of the food making, all of the gift giving. They would also have speeches, dances, and eating contests. And it was expected of the host to make more food than anyone could eat, so that the guests would be able to take home food to their tribes and show everyone what an amazing host that potlatch was. And one of the majority of the food, since they are in the Northwest Coast region, was fish or seal meat, and they would dip it in seal oil as a delicacy. That was what made their food special. And for gifting during normal potlatches to raise status in society, they would give painted pottery or trunks, a lot of what you would see in museums for Native American artifacts. And in fact, it was really competitive trying to give gifts. They would often go bankrupt trying to serve their guests the best they could. And that's how their society ranked them. So everyone saw that as the most important thing to do. And I also studied Hindu weddings.
I do have a question. What does Tlingit mean?
Oh, Tlingit?
Tlingit, yes.
So Tlingit is the tribe of the people. The Northwest region had multiple tribes, but the Tlingit is the one that we were focusing on the potlatch. So, now with Hindu weddings, most Hindu weddings are arranged before the groom and bride even meet each other, and it's often the first time that they see each other. So, a lot like how Western weddings have the tradition where a groom and a bride can't look at each other until the ceremony begins, or else it's bad luck. It's the same for Hindu, but it's more so that they can't see each other until the ceremony begins.
So with that, like one of the things, with our culture is that women wear a veil when they get married, and that's kind of the same idea, like they're hidden behind the veil.
Well, yes.
Is that something that plays in there?
Now, women don't necessarily wear a veil. They do have a outfit called a sari, and that's a professional outfit that Indian women wear to social events. And for Indian weddings, specifically, they wear red saris. And it's like a sash that goes across their body, but they rarely cover their face, maybe just their hair. What actually happens is that the men are covered by a curtain until the woman is able to start the ceremony. And how that ceremony is started is the woman with her father opens up a coconut and serves it to the man. And so he eats from that. And what that represents, that's a symbol for prosperity. And what they do after that, the couple will make paste made of crushed cumin and brown sugar, which represents bittersweet with the cumin and the brown sugar. And they'll rub it on a betel leaf and paste it onto each other's head. Now, rice is also a very big tradition in India. Just as it is in Western culture, you'll throw rice at the couple. Now, in Indian weddings, it's usually rice colored with turmeric, so it's yellow rice. And the food that's served at Hindu weddings, it differs between North Indian and South Indian weddings. While North Indian weddings will serve curries and paneer and tandoori meat.
What is paneer?
Paneer is a cheese. So it can be kind of like a curry, like a liquidy cheese, but they can also serve it in chunks. And tandoori meat as well as naans, which are little flatbreads that you eat food with. And then they'll also serve meat dishes in North India, which like butter chicken or lamb curry. But South Indian weddings are almost always strictly vegetarian, just because of the difference in cultures. And what they'll serve there are several rice dishes mixed with various different kinds of vegetables and spices and seasonings. And they'll also serve dal, sabzi, dosa, which is little pancakes, that savory pancakes, kind of like crepes.
Okay.
And then idli, which are little rice cakes. And this is all eaten by hand and not even served on plates. They use banana leaves to serve the food. And most of the Hindu weddings, whether it be north or south, they'll serve a sweet Indian dessert called halva. It's actually very popular throughout Europe. And it's a dense fudge-like sweet made with sesame paste. So I don't know if you guys have ever tried it, but I had this one that had sort of a metallic covering, but it is a very common Indian dessert.
Huh. Yeah, that actually, we have an Indian coworker who brought back some candies and desserts from India.
Oh,
when she
that's
went
awesome.
To visit, and there was
And
some
it
that
had
had like,
metallic cover.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Oh yeah, it tastes delicious.
cool.
Okay, there. What the rituals really show for Indian values is that they are big in their spirituality and their connection with food and how they can represent these big spiritual ideas, religious ideas through just a representation with food. And no matter what side of India you're going through, you're going to expect a big, beautiful, and colorful feast at a wedding. And
That sounds awesome.
yeah, I know. They're beautiful. So, also, over the holidays, my friend invited me to her Catholic church celebration called Las Posadas. And Las Posadas means the inns in Spanish. And it's a celebration that we all get together around the Christmas time. And she starts a presentation listing all these blessings, the Catholic blessings, and every member of the church that attends will sit and listen to the process in both English and Spanish.
Oh, wow.
How long does that usually last?
So it usually lasts one night, a couple of hours. There's a big ceremony, there's reading of the blessings, and then there's also an activity, and then follows a feast. So it could last several hours. But they also complete that same event multiple times throughout a week. So each night, a different member of the church will host Las Posadas.
So was your friend hosting it?
Yes, at the night that I went, my friend was hosting, and she was reading off the blessings, and she was singing the main lines of all the songs. So, and what we did there, it was really fun. I got to dress up as Mary.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, well, another first-comer dressed up as Joseph. And we stood by the stage as the blessings were read, and then we went out into the parking lot, and we played out the story of Mary and Joseph visiting all of the inns. So, one group, including my friend, were representing the inns, while me, dressed as Mary, and my friend dressed as Joseph, walked the rest of the church around to the inns, and we sang to them, asking to come in Spanish. I didn't really know the lyrics, but I definitely tried to sing along. And we did that until the final third inn let us in, and then we all went inside and enjoyed a feast of tamales, empanadas, and conchas, which are sweet Mexican breads. And I helped my friend serve since she was hosting and I was there for her. So that was very fun. Even though I didn't help make the food, I still got to help serve.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That actually is making me hungry.
Me too.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So I also studied 3 subcultures. I looked at Hawaiian poi, Pennsylvania Dutch cuisine, and then my own family Christmas. I did a lot of observations and question asking.
Mm-hmm.
Hawaiian poi is interesting because it's just one food, and there's not a lot of menu items. It's a sticky paste that's actually made from the root of the taro plant. And the way that it is made, there's actually a very special ritual for that. Poi is an ancient food. It's been part of the Hawaiian cuisine for since Hawaii was settled, basically. And the way that it is made is actually called kuai. That's what the process of making poi is. And it's an important ritual in the tradition of poi in Hawaiian culture.
What does the taro plant taste like?
Well, the root of the taro plant is what makes the poi, and it actually, when it's made, it has a really mild, slightly sweet flavor. It's
Mm-hmm.
a pretty mild flavor. But it can be fermented for 2 or 3 days, and then once it's fermented, it can't go bad. It can sit there for as long as you want to keep it, and it's got a sour, pickled taste.
Is it like traditionally fermented?
It can be either. It's a very much
okay.
a preference thing. Some people prefer to eat it when it's fresh and it's
Mhm.
mild and sweet. That's how they definitely start kids,
Okay.
young kids. They
That
start
makes sense.
very young, like giving children poi so that they will get used to the flavor.
Mm-hmm.
And then some older Hawaiians prefer it to be fermented. So the process of making it is called kuai, and that's a very important ritual in the culture. And people who are committed to doing kuai in the very most honorable way to honor the ritual will strip down to the bare basics. Men might wear a melo, which is a loincloth. Women will put their hair back, take off their jewelry, their nail polish. It's very much like being about the taro plant and the process of making it, and that's where the focus is. So they take a board and a stone, they steam the roots of the taro plant, and then once they're steamed and they're soft, they actually take the stone and they literally just bang the roots
Mm-hmm.
to mash them, and they'll add just a little bit of water to create a paste.
Okay.
And then once the paste is created, then at that point, it's just a matter of determining how thick you want it to be. So poi is judged on, the thickness is determined by 1 finger, 2 finger, or 3 finger poi. And that is determined by how many fingers you need to use to get a bite-sized portion of poi. So if you have to use 3 fingers, that means it's a pretty thin paste. Whereas if you only have to use 1 finger, it's pretty thick. And if you use 2 fingers, it's kind of in between. That's what you need to do to get a bite-sized portion.
Are people judged by the thickness of the paste?
Yeah, actually the ideal is 2 finger poi. And so 3 finger poi is considered too runny. 1 finger is considered too thick. It is ultimately all about preference, but yes, restaurants are generally judged for, if their poi is up to standard. Is it 2 finger poi? And then there's an important legend with spirituality that is an important part of Hawaiian culture. The legend is that the Sky Father and the daughter of the Earth Mother had a child. The child was stillborn, fell to the earth, and 2 days after the child fell, a taro plant sprouted where the child fell. And then they had a second child who was a strong man, and they gave him the job of nurturing that taro plant, which was his older brother. And they gave the taro plant the job of sustaining and giving life to his younger brother. And so that was the source of that was the ancestors of all Hawaiian people. And so Hawaiians believe that they came and originated from the taro plant, and that's what gives them life.
So in that way they kind of get to their bare necessities when
Yes.
they're making it, because it's such a traditional.
Yes, it's a very spiritual food.
Yeah.
In fact, there is a spiritual component to it where when poi is put on the table, they actually, anyone who's arguing or if there's conflict or complaining at the table, it has to stop when poi comes to the table because they believe that's their ancestors. And then Pennsylvania Dutch cuisine is interesting because when it comes to Pennsylvania Dutch, a lot of people associate that with Amish food, but the Amish community is only about 5% of the Pennsylvania Dutch region.
Oh.
The Pennsylvania Dutch area is south central and southeastern Pennsylvania. It's German and Swiss settlers brought this food culture to Pennsylvania. And it's really based around seasonal vegetables, comfort food, and home-cooked food. There's a lot of value in using what nature has provided in the season and in bringing home-cooked, comfortable food to the table. So one of the most common traditions with Pennsylvania Dutch is that every meal has to have 7 sweets and 7 sours.
Oh, do they just have the sweets and sours?
No, actually, they can have savory foods, like a meat that's a savory meat, or, like bread or things like that that are just kind of savory.
Okay.
But a
they
meal
have
is
to
not
have
considered, the table is not complete until there are 7 sweets and 7 sours. So this could be, a dish like a pickled vegetable would be a sour, or a dessert would be a sweet, but it could also just be condiments or sauces, chutneys, preserves, any sort of spread or a condiment would be included in that 7 sweets and 7 sours. Another very common Pennsylvania Dutch food is chicken pot pie. And the interesting thing about this is in the Pennsylvania Dutch cuisine, chicken pot pie is not a pie. There's no crust, not even on top. It's actually a stew with noodles. And the noodles are flat square noodles, but it's used for a lot of church suppers and firehouse dinners. Use chicken pot pie. Gumbus is another Pennsylvania Dutch meal. It's a 1-pot casserole. There's things like shredded cabbage, meat, dried fruit, onions. It's a really common meal for almost any household.
So is that anything like gumbo or just?
I know. I thought the same. I wondered the same thing, as if it was related to gumbo, because the words are so similar. But there's actually no relation in the two meals.
And that makes sense because this is German and Swiss, while gumbo is more French or Louisiana Cajun.
Yes, exactly.
Cajun's the word.
I would think the only similarity might be that they are both kind of 1-pot dishes, and so gumbus is kind of one of those foods that frugal families or rural families could kind of just throw whatever they had into this pot and make a casserole out of it. And they could either serve it, everyone gets their individual dish of gumbus, or they could serve it family style where everyone gets bread to dip into the common dish. For New Year's, Pennsylvania Dutch serve roast pork and sauerkraut as opposed to ham and black-eyed peas. That's how they bring in.
So that's the seasonal. Yeah.
That's how they bring in good luck for the new year. And then a common dessert in the Pennsylvania Dutch cuisine is shoofly pie, which is a pie crust that's filled with a molasses cake batter. And then on top of that is a more dry, crumbly version of the same batter. So it winds up creating a layered molasses pie, essentially.
Okay.
Sounds really good.
Yeah.
And then the last thing that I studied was my own family Christmas celebration.
Yeah.
And that started the day before, actually on Christmas Eve. My mom brought a lot of snacks and things for us to munch on while we made desserts and made the cornbread for the dressing and things like that. So we did a lot of baking and cooking on Christmas Eve. And then when we were done with our Christmas Eve baking, we had hot cocoa and played games the rest of the night. And then the next day was more snacking while we made the large family meal. I noticed that we were making the same foods that we actually have every year at our Christmas dinner. We always have turkey, ham, my grandmother's dressing, her recipe is the dressing that we eat. My mom makes fried okra, we have deviled eggs, cranberry sauce, pumpkin pie.
Wow.
And then we have other dishes that kind of rotate in, and they're different every year.
Did you cook anything?
I actually made my grandmother's dressing recipe.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Did it turn out the way you wanted it?
The way grandma makes it?
No, it didn't, actually.
I know that feeling.
I know. It didn't quite make it, but No, it didn't.
Well, how many people were y'all trying to serve?
We actually had about 12 people at my
Oh, wow.
house.
That's a lot bigger than mine. I think we just had 6.
Oh,
so,
yeah. You know, I asked my sister and my mom, I asked them some questions, you know, as I was observing these things happening with the Christmas preparations. And my sister, I asked her if she thought it was important the way we prepare the food.
Mm-hmm.
And she did. She thought it was very important. She mentioned that fried okra has to be made by my mom, because that's the way we like it. The dressing has to be my grandmother's recipe.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I don't make it where it comes out quite the right way, it's important we use that recipe.
It's that recipe, yeah.
And, you know, everything else needs to be homemade except for rolls and cranberry sauce.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, we prefer those to be store-bought. My mom thought it was really important that we come together and we put a lot of time and energy into preparing the Christmas meal, because she likes to pass on these traditions and recipes onto the younger generation. And it was pretty clear that my family really values togetherness and putting energy and effort into a meal together, and doing a lot of snacking and socializing while we do it.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
It was fun. How many people did you have at your Christmas?
Well, for me, it was a total of 22
Oh my gosh, that's a lot more than mine.
siblings and nieces
So
and
you had
nephews.
The
yes.
extended family.
And my subculture studies was, one of them is football game tailgating, the other one was Japanese rice, and then of course my traditional Christmas dinner that we prepare. The football game tailgating is an activity where fans get together before the football game, and basically they throw a party atmosphere. It dates back to the 1800s.
Oh, wow.
I didn't expect it to go that far.
Back then, they would do like homemade biscuits, home-cured ham in slab packages in a basket. It got more popular and caught on with fans back, later on in 1970s.
So was it celebrated for like any sporting events, like during the 1800s?
1800s is mainly celebrated for football games.
Okay. But then they were,
Yeah.
it became more popular in the
Now,
70s. Okay.
yes, in the 70s, it was big, it got more popular. People were doing it for football. They would, the tailgating areas were decorated with colors and gears of the football teams. It included food, furniture, drinks, music, and basically all these items play an important role of that experience. Tailgating is not considered an American tradition. It's a way of showing support for your team, and it's also used for bringing people together, connecting. It's a way of building a community and to show your loyalty to and your love for your team.
How many people usually come to a tailgating party?
A tailgating party really can be any numbers. Normally, a lot of times it's from 10 to 25. It just depends on the group that get together and do that.
So is there more than one tailgating for each game?
Yes. Basically, there's fans that set up tailgating areas all around stadiums, along the blocks of wherever the stadium is. One of the common tailgating foods is grilled meats. There's no limit, as far as what foods they can bring a tailgater can bring, but the most popular ones, again, it's grilled meats. They do anything from barbecue ribs to hot dogs, hamburgers, grilled chicken, side dishes like potato salad, chips and queso, pasta salads, and of course chicken wings.
Gotta have
This
those.
is very
Yes.
American.
Exactly.
And I'm still hungry.
So my other subculture studies was Japanese rice,
Mhm.
and the role that Japanese rice has different roles in the Japanese culture. Um, one the one role that it plays is it brings harmony between the families in a Japanese culture because of how labor intense it is to grow rice. So basically, what happens is families work together, even though everybody has their own rice crops. They all work together to um, basically harvest the crops, and they even share resources like water and the irrigation facilities. The way they set up that is basically all the fields are
Doesn't it-
designed to
Yeah.
be downhill so that when the water comes from the top, it irrigates all of the crops, the
That's
rice
pretty
crops.
In pictures I've seen, it kind of looks like a staircase.
Yes,
Yeah.
it goes in different levels. The other thing that the language rice plays is the language. The culture it basically provides important concepts and values to the Japanese culture.
Mhm.
The importance of rice as a diet staple mirrors the Japanese language. The word gohan takes up two meanings. One of them is cooked rice and meals.
Mhm.
And then, but gohan can also be used as a prefix. One of them is osasa. Osasa is basically with the word gohan in front of it means breakfast. The other one is hiru,
Mhm.
which means lunch, and bahi means dinner.
Oh, so would you say like Osasa Gohan or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's cool. So rice, the word for rice literally is
It means
in
meal.
Yes.
each of their descriptions of their meals.
Yes.
Wow.
So do they eat rice for lunch, dinner, and breakfast?
Yes, as a matter of fact, if there is not rice on the plate for either breakfast, lunch, or dinner, it's not considered a complete meal.
Interesting.
Yeah. So another thing that rice has in the culture is other than food, it's also a way of determining how much rice you have determines the status of your wealth.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it's used as an instrument of trading because it
Kinda
has
like a
the same
currency.
value of money, yes, and it's used for payment of services.
Are there other things that rice is used for? Is it really just food and money and status?
No, actually, the rice is used for the brand is used for facial scrub,
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's interesting.
and the tatami for actually to make tatami mats.
Oh, okay.
And then there's the rice. The rice paste is actually used for bookbinding and is also used to in the process of making silk kimonos.
Wow.
So it seems like rice plays a pretty big part in their
Culture.
Industry.
Entire,
Yes, in
yeah.
Yeah.
agriculture.
They use rice for everything.
Correct. And the other thing is, it also plays a role in religion.
Mm.
One in the Chitu
Mhm.
religion, some of the functions that priests do, it revolves around rice growing, and it includes products. It includes other products. Some of the priests even tend to rice plots. Even the emperor takes it serious to where he blesses the rice crops during a, it's called coronation ceremony.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool.
And then, of course, rice as a meal, although it's been declining in the household consumption of rice, it is more popular than ever, like in 24-hour stores, restaurants, chains that are geared toward family. In fast food stores, rice snacks are preferred over bread snacks.
Oh, okay.
In the U.S., the U.S. consumers prefer long grain fluffy rice than because it doesn't stick together.
But the Japanese prefer the sticky rice.
Correct. The shorter grain sticky rice for popular foods like sushi and
Yeah.
Sense.
other
Yeah.
dishes.
I bet it's easier to eat with chopsticks too.
Oh,
Yes.
that's
Yes,
true.
it stays together so you can pick it up with chopsticks. And finally, my third subculture was my family preparation for our Christmas dinner. This year we actually hosted at my sister's house, and we all basically got together on Christmas Eve. We started to prepare the traditional food of tamales. We do this every year, and basically because it is an important part of our tradition and our culture, this is a family get together because the making of tamales, you make them by the dozen. So it involves the whole family basically.
How many did you make?
We made 25 dozen.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that hundreds?
100 and, if I remember correctly,
It's got to be a
25
lot.
dozen,
25
yes,
dozen.
exactly.
I can't do the
I
math
can't
right
think
now.
of that right now, but
So wait,
yes.
when you say the whole family's involved, do you mean like little kids, to
Yes.
older people,
Well,
like
wow.
everyone?
Yes.
Wow.
When we first start off, my sister's the one who starts it off, and basically what she does, she seasons the meat. We had pork and we had chicken. She basically starts a electrical roaster, and she starts cooking that by basically boiling what they call chili pods.
Okay.
It's little red chili leaves,
Yeah.
and you boil those because you're going to use that for seasoning the meats.
So is it boiling in the water to give the water the flavor, or?
Basically what you're doing is you're softening the chili pods because it's dry.
Oh, okay.
So then what happens is when the chili pods are ready, they're set aside for a little bit, for a while, and then the family starts preparing what they call, the leaves. I'm trying to think what they're called.
The cornhouse?
The cornhouse, I'm sorry.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's the cornhouse. We start cleaning them as they're getting them ready. There's a couple of them that get torn into like little strings, and I'll explain what that out does in a little bit. But during the whole process of seasoning the meats and everything, my other sister begins to prepare the cornmeal. We call it masa. And basically what you do with that is it's mixed with water and what we call manteca, which is a pork lard, and it's knitted into a dough. Everyone pretty much is helping to prepare these meals. My sister's cooking the meats and seasoning. My other sister's doing the masa, and then the rest of the family are doing the cornhouse leaves and stuff like that. The way it's prepared is we make our own chili pot, and when doing that, my sister that's making the masa we have a technique that my great grandmother showed us, is that you take a pinch of that masa after she kneads it, and you put it in a glass of water, and she lets it fall into the water. The speed of where the masa hits the bottom of the glass determines whether you need to add more lard or you need to add more of the cornmeal. What it is that you want the masa to have a slow, steady pace before it hits the bottom of the glass.
So how do you know which one to add? Like if it sinks too fast, what do
If
you
it
add?
sinks too fast, then you need to add more cornmeal. If it's going too slow, it sinks fast. If it's going too slow, then it's the other way around. I'm sorry. You add if it sinks too fast, then you add more lard to it.
Okay.
So
Make
that
lighter.
it floats.
Yes,
Yeah.
that it floats more.
Oh,
If it's
that
going
makes sense.
too
Yeah.
slow, then you add more of the cornmeal.
So it's heavy.
That-
Yes,
yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
Makes total
exactly.
sense.
So once that's ready, and the dough's ready, and the meats are ready, what everyone else does is we start grabbing a spoon, and you start spreading the cornmeal, the cornmeal on the leaves, and then you pack it with the meat. Once that's done, we wrap it up, and then those strings I was saying that we cut from the cornhusk, you use those like a string.
To tie them
Yeah,
up.
to tie them
Oh,
up,
yeah.
so that it doesn't come open while they're cooking. You're gonna put, and then what we do is we put them in the slow cooker in about 6 hours. So this is because we're making 25 dozens, you put in 3 dozen, 4 dozens at a time. And during this time, everybody's having a good time, drinking some wine, talking about, the old days and how we grew up, how my great grandmother taught us how to do this.
Yeah.
Back in those days, the meat, the pork meat, would actually come from a pig's head.
Oh.
That would get-
Whoa.
Yeah. So.
But it had to be from the pig's head? Or
Yeah, it was a delicacy.
Oh, okay.
like fish eyes.
Something like that. So once all that was done and everything, I kind of asked my mom, hey, how long has this been a tradition? And she basically said, as far as she knows, is when she married my dad, which was 50 years ago. That's when she was brought into this tradition. But my great grandmother's been doing it way before that. So I asked my siblings, what's the whole importance, and why do we think we need to go through this if we can actually go out and buy tamales already made?
Yeah,
And
not spend
basically-
6 hours.
Exactly. So basically, they're like, well, this is a family tradition. We want to keep it going with my great grandmother, and we want to pass it down to the younger kids. And we also take this time to have family get-togethers, have the family do the work, and enjoy it the day after that.
Yeah,
That is very nice.
that's great. So I can't help but think about, some of the, like you said it was the pig head was the delicacy,
Mhm.
and like you mentioned seal oil in
Yeah,
the Hindu,
seal oil
was it
is-
Hindu wedding?
It was actually the potlatch where they
Okay.
dip everything in seal oil.
Yes.
So yeah, that's how they. You wouldn't think of. I'm not sure if I've ever had seal oil before. I don't know if you guys have.
No, I have
But
not.
that is an interesting comparison.
Very interesting.
You know what I also noticed is you talked about making tamales. Well, with my friend's posada celebration, all I did was serve them, but the method of making them seems a lot more difficult, so I have to give her some credit for that.
Yeah, and both of those actually seem like they really are focused on keeping Hispanic cultures and
Yeah,
traditions
that's true.
alive.
That's true.
Seems
So,
like.
especially mine was more focused on the Catholic Hispanic tradition coming from Mexico, but yours is more of like an intimate familial.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right,
Right.
right.
Actually, we could probably split these up into what's more widespread and celebrated
Yeah.
among multiple people, while what's more celebrated among families.
Yeah, because, you've got my family Christmas and John's family Christmas, of course,
Yeah.
is a family thing. And then, the church, activity.
the church
with the Las
activity, and
Posadas.
then the Hindu weddings. That's family and friends,
Friends.
basically.
You know, what's interesting to me about that, though, is it is family and friends, but it's also a very national level, you know, or
Yeah.
even international, because it's a Hindu, Hindu
That's
is a
true,
religion,
that's
so
true.
it's
It
a
is-
global.
It is celebrated all across the world. I'm going to a Hindu wedding next month in New Orleans, so
Wow.
Oh, wow.
That's cool.
yeah.
Yeah, and then you've got things that are more regional, you know, like the Pennsylvania Dutch cuisine and the,
Tailgating is kind
The
of a
tailgating is-
national.
yeah, that's all over
national thing,
America.
yeah, so it is interesting to think about the differences in where and how many people are involved.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the Pennsylvania Dutch cuisine only happens in those specific areas of Pennsylvania. Is the other parts just ignore it?
Yeah, so the Pennsylvania Dutch cuisine is really in just the central and southeastern
It's like a region.
regions.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's regional for sure.
that's interesting. That it wouldn't spread throughout the whole state or even that whole northeastern region.
Yeah, so what I learned when I was reading about it is that there are touristy sort of fake Pennsylvania Dutch cuisine that's more of like what you would see in pop culture, like
Interesting.
whoopie pies are an example of fake Pennsylvania Dutch
Pennsylvania
cuisine.
cuisine.
It's not actually something that originated in Pennsylvania Dutch, but it's associated in pop culture with
Wow.
Pennsylvania Dutch. So I'm sure that the closer you get to the Pennsylvania Dutch region, you see things that are kind of touristy little,
Yeah, that makes sense.
Imitating
Where they're
that.
kind of
Yeah.
exactly.
yeah.
Oh,
So I thought there were some
yeah.
interesting similarities across some of our things that we studied with the use of rice in
Right.
Rice is
blessings
very
Yeah.
important
and ceremonies.
in multiple cultures. I know Hindu and Japanese, they're Asian,
Mhm.
and I know rice is very important in the whole. Excuse me, the whole Asia.
What I
Yes,
found
for sure.
surprising was, what I learned from it is basically that rice has a valuable
Yeah.
currency.
Yeah,
Well,
I
it's
thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
I loved thinking too about when you were talking about rice being a status, like how much rice you
Rice.
own as a status
That's
of where you are in the
Well,
society.
yeah.
That tied in and was very similar, I thought,
With
to
the potlatches.
Yeah.
Yes.
The potlatches
Exactly.
are based on societal rankings. You throw them to be higher in your society. So
Right.
it's important to see how much food can change how people look at you,
Yeah.
basically.
And I was going to ask you, with the tailgating, do you feel, based on your research, does it seem like the ranking of your team and of your status as a fan group goes up the more effort and work you put into your tailgating environment?
That, and I also know that it helps when the team is actually winning, because more people will stand by that team, and you end up getting a bigger crowd for the tailgate.
Oh, that's funny. So the winning
Winning
tailgate,
plays
yeah.
a role in that too, yes.
That's
Interesting. And so how many of the cultures that we studied used a paste or a dough? Because there's
Well,
poi.
The
Poi
poi
is a
is a
paste.
paste.
The cornmeal.
The cornmeal
is a
masa.
paste. Yeah.
And then didn't you mention that in the Hindu wedding there's a paste?
There's a lot of different foods that are technically pasty, but I wouldn't say that there's anything that's really being ground up. Kind of like how the poi and the masa are getting ground.
Right.
Right.
Both with stone, actually, I think
Yes.
is what y'all mentioned. So
Yeah.
that's interesting that
We
I-
use what is called in Spanish it's called molcajete. It's basically just a stone dish, or, like a pot, and it's
Mhm.
got a little rock, and that's what they use to crush that. and mold it.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's very similar to what happens with poi, with the stone
With the
grinding.
stone,
Yeah. And then I'm thinking about, how poi is very ancient. Like, which of these are ancient versus modern?
well, I'm not sure
subcultures?
how old the Hindu weddings go, but I'm sure the food has been around for as long
Right.
as Hindus have.
I'm sure, yeah.
Yeah.
That seems like a very, more ancient tradition.
Mhm.
Japanese rice.
Japanese
is-
rice,
yes.
definitely. That's what they grew up on.
Tailgating, I don't know.
I'd
if
say
it's
that's probably more
obviously-
modern.
Because it goes back to the
1800s,
1800s.
yeah.
True.
So that's technically America's beginning. So we
True.
could call that ancient
That's true.
for our country.
Right. And that's about the same time the Pennsylvania Dutch cuisine was brought to America.
And then Tlingit potlatches as well. They are based on Native American culture, which obviously has dwindled down as the future has come. But in the past, they were the biggest thing that you could go to.
Yeah. Now, in your experience and research and observations with Las Posadas,
Yes.
do you know anything about when that tradition started?
I actually am not sure. That's a very good question to ask, though. Do you know?
No, I don't think, I know they've been doing it for years.
Well,
I mean,
since it is a biblical story
Yes,
over Mary and
exactly.
Joseph, I'm assuming it's been a
Yeah,
very
probably
popular
so.
thing. Yeah.
Probably so. Yeah. It was really highly enlightening, I thought, to do the research about these cultures. I thought it was
Yeah, I agree.
very interesting.
It was an eye-opener for me with the whole Japanese culture and the Hindu weddings and
Yeah.
stuff like that. I mean,
Yeah, to see the
So-
rituals and the symbols
yes.
that were used. So, the symbols, I'm trying to, think through what are some of the similarities in symbols. So, certainly with poi, the
The
grinding
symbol is
stone.
The grinding
Mhm.
stone, also the plant, the taro plant.
Oh, absolutely,
And
the
I think
symbolism of,
that connects well with the
Mhm.
symbolism of rice.
Yep.
The plants itself, just the plant, means so much to the culture.
right, almost everything you talked about was basically symbolic. That
Yes.
it was symbolic of, what was the first one?
It was the harmony.
Harmony, yeah.
Yeah,
harmony.
yeah.
I place
So that it's a symbolic part of how the culture is a harmonic
Yes.
culture.
And it brings them together and all work together, help each other out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great.